I was really drawn to stories that I felt reflected my own background, which is multicultural and diverse. So I've always wanted to kind of figure out like how other people navigated multiple cultures and a lot of like influences. So if anything, most of my stories revolve around that area in terms of like trying to showcase people's differences, but also how they have navigated a lot of life's challenges. Whenever people are trying to do something new or creating something new, my interest is always piqued. And when the two combine, then that's kind of like the perfect sweet spot, right? I'm always there for stories that showcase inclusion and innovation. So when those two things happen, I think there's something magical.
Hi, everyone. Today I'm speaking with Carren Jao, an Emmy-nominated content leader, award-winning children's book author, and the founder of Red Thread Consulting. She works with nonprofits, with startups, and founders to transform creative chaos into high-impact, mission-aligned storytelling. She is the author of 2 forthcoming children's books coming out in 2026 and 2027. And we talk a lot about growing up in Manila, building a life in Los Angeles, raising multicultural kids, and the threads that can connect all of her work, from being a journalist to becoming an entrepreneur and an author. It's a great conversation, and I hope you enjoy it. Let's dive in. Carren, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. I'm very excited to talk to you today.
Thank you so much, Mariana, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, and I really appreciate you taking the time to chat.
So we already made an introduction to our listeners, but I want to give you a chance to introduce yourself.
I'm Carren. I'm a Chinese Filipino storyteller. I grew up in the Philippines and moved to Los Angeles, where I'm currently based. I am a longtime journalist, gone through different industries. I've worked at global marketing companies, at public TV stations, and as most recently in a media startup. I am now the founder and the principal of my own content consulting firm, Red Thread Consulting. And I'm also a forthcoming children's book author in the next couple of years. So watch out for that in the bookshelves.
Yes, congrats on that. We're going to dig into it more. I would love to start from your life in the Philippines. Just for context, how old were you when you moved to LA? When did you move to?
So my path to LA was a little bit winding. I moved here to Los Angeles about, oh my gosh, 15 years ago. But I had previously spent the year prior to that in Syracuse, where I was taking up my grad school. I took up arts journalism for my graduate studies. And then from there, I came from the Philippines then. So I've been here for, I guess, about 16 years.
And you came with a student visa, correct?
Yes. So I went to the US first on a student visa. And then eventually I thought I would stay for the year and then go back to the Philippines. I was like, oh, okay, it's good. It will broaden my experience about the world at large, right? And then I guess one thing led to another. My then boyfriend and I eventually decided to get married. He found a job out in Los Angeles, which is the reason why we are in Los Angeles. And then we eventually stayed and got our citizenship here.
Can you talk a little bit about your life in the Philippines? What part of the Philippines are you from?
I'm from the capital city, so Metro Manila. So I grew up in like a Chinese Filipino community in the Philippines. It was interesting because from the very beginning, I always felt like I had a mixed heritage because I grew up both within a Chinese family, but also in a larger Filipino community. Even from the very beginning, we've already mixed traditions. There are some times that we love going to the town fiestas and things like that. But you also go to like the temple or you celebrate like the Mid-Autumn Festival with your family. So that kind of ended up being compounded when I moved to the United States because here now I am Chinese and Filipino and also American. And then being American also means a lot of different things, I think. Not just one thing. It's this really interesting mosaic of influences. So I don't know if there's ever a time that I actually felt that I was like, oh, I am purely this one thing. It's really, I'm always a mix of many different things.
That's so interesting. That mix of Filipino, Chinese, American.
Yeah, I think more and more people grow up that way, especially as the world becomes more global and there's a lot more migration and things and movement around. You'll see a lot more people definitely with mixed heritages and trying to figure out how to make a whole out of that.
So living in the Philippines, did you always wanted to move abroad, or it was more that the opportunity presented itself?
I think there was always a possibility of going abroad. So in the Philippines, many people have ties to a family outside of the country. So it's not unusual to have people talk about relatives in the United States, relatives in Canada, relatives in Australia, or going abroad for different things. So I think the possibility was always there, but it never occurred to me to kind of really go for it until later in life. Because maybe at that point, you're like more ready when you're older. When you're younger, maybe for me, I think other people might be more courageous. When they're younger, you're like, yes, I'm going to go out and I'm going to do it as soon as possible. I think for me, it took me a while to warm up to that idea because yeah, because the world is a pretty big place. And then sometimes you just need to take your time to absorb all of it before you can say, okay, I'm ready for this next step.
And why the US, Karen? I'm sure it relates to a lot of the reasons of why a lot of us moved, but what was it about in your career, in your personal life, that part of you wanted to move and also specifically to LA?
Yeah. Well, LA I didn't choose specifically, to be honest, but it was more the country. I think the US was a really solid choice because at that time in the Philippines, I was a freelance arts journalist. I had covered a lot about architecture and design for local magazines, for magazines in the Asian region. So I built up this whole portfolio, but I always felt like, if you're talking about journalism, I feel like the United States really had a strong reputation of like strong journalism, of journalism that as service to the community. So if I wanted to be in a place where I could learn more and to be in like a bigger global stage, I think the US was really that place. So I decided to give it a shot and then applied for graduate studies in Syracuse University.
Did you always wanted to be a journalist back in the Philippines?
Ooh, that's a very good question. I think I was more generally a communicator. Like I love writing and telling stories and learning more about people. But that part of my life probably didn't kind of coalesce until later on in life when I tried to focus on like what things do I really enjoy. And it was talking to people, getting to know them, getting to know their story, and kind of learning more about the challenges they faced and how they overcame it.
When did you move to the US? What was the cultural shock like for you in your career and your personal life?
Definitely, as promised, a bigger stage and a bigger pool. There was a lot that I learned. That was also the point in time where I realized there's a whole media ecosystem that's happening, and you can see the digital change happening more and more and with more progress. Moving to the US was definitely a thrill. There was a lot of things to learn. There were more thinkers and more theories that I was exposed to. And then on the other side, also a lot of like digital transformation that happened. Right? You can see media organizations start to publish things digitally, start to explore what does podcasts mean. That was the time, I think, at the height of like this American life, where you realize like there is a power in a different medium too. It was a long form feature style of audio journalism. There was a lot of interest in like multimedia work as well, so combining photography and audio at that time, then eventually video. So that was really interesting to me. Kind of it felt like being on the cusp of innovation and seeing how all of these digital tools could help tell a story better. And it's something that I didn't necessarily think when I was in the Philippines because primarily I was a writer. Like I was a writer who happened to take photos. It was very much like foundational skills, right? But moving here, it was like an entryway to like a Willy Wonka's factory of media type of so many possibilities. And I think all of that now is actually just emphasized even more nowadays with a lot of technology, and you can essentially transform a certain piece of media into other types of media with the help of technology at this point. So it's really interesting kind of seeing how we began in this one entryway of just like writing and text, but eventually kind of evolved to being like a multimedia, multi-platform storyteller, seeing the evolution of tools that enable you to do that in an easier, faster manner too.
Right. And I know you worked at many places. I want to talk about that. But as you started in having a professional life in the US, was it hard to get your foot in the door as a journalist and build a portfolio, start building that portfolio that you have today?
I always tell other people too, like the challenge sometimes being a foreign born person is that you don't have a personal network here. I can tell the difference between like, oh, I was born in the Philippines. I have known all of these people for, 10, 20 years of my life. Versus moving to a new country where you literally have to kind of regrow your network and kind of start introducing yourself to people all over again. So in one way that was liberating in the sense like I could meet so many different kinds of people and I have no idea what they're going to do or what they've done and what they've accomplished. But it's also kind of a challenge in itself to raise your hand and to introduce yourself to people. So when it came to breaking into the industry, I would say it was a little bit of a challenge in the sense you had to really get to know the lay of the land, who were the journalists working and who were people who would be taking on assignments. So there was definitely a lot of journalistic work in the sense of researching that as well, like figuring out who is the editor that actually is responsible for assignments or what types of stories can I tell in a place that's new to me. And then getting to know those people, figuring out if there's a story there, and then figuring out is there a story that I can tell, with whom can I tell it with, right? There's like lots of questions that needed to be answered. But I think in general, it was persistence that helped. And I think for many people also, really, if you kind of set yourself a goal and then start making steps towards it, even like small steps will help. And then when you look back, you realize, oh, you actually kind of gone pretty far.
What kind of stories did you like to cover more as a journalist?
In terms of stories, I was really drawn to stories that I felt reflected my own background as well, which is multicultural and diverse. So I've always wanted to kind of figure out like how other people navigated multiple cultures and a lot of like influences. So if anything, most of my stories revolve around that area in terms of like trying to showcase people's differences, but also how they have navigated a lot of life's challenges. The second area that I would say also is an area of innovation. Like whenever people are trying to do something new or creating something new, my interest is always piqued. And when the two combine, then that's kind of like the perfect sweet spot, right? I'm always there for stories that showcase inclusion and innovation. So when those two things happen, I think there's something magical.
And in terms of roles within journalism, what did you enjoy the most as you went through your career? Or what kind of roles do you enjoy the most?
I do honestly enjoy that whole process from being a reporter that kind of looks around and finds the story and gets to know people. And I also enjoy that other part where you're more of an editor or a producer, which for me is actually kind of very parallel because you're the shepherd for this story. You're trying to help tell the best story that you can. And you're like that conduit between like a third party perspective on how to shape the story, but also you connect the writer or the journalist to the organization to make sure that whatever resources the organization can offer to tell the story better is something that you end up using for that story. So I don't know, it was very hard to choose. I do enjoy, I think later in life, and now that I'm a little bit more advanced in my career, I do enjoy being able to connect the dots for people, to be that conduit, and to make sure that a story gets told in the best way that it can be through whatever resources that we have.
Absolutely. I agree with that. And you worked for PBS for a while and produced many stories. One of them particularly grabbed my attention, and that was The Migrant Kitchen, which explores stories of food and culture. And I'm just curious overall, what was the time like for you at PBS?
So I was a digital producer for PBS SoCal, which is the local PBS station here. And at first, it was an interesting role because I accepted the role thinking that it would be more of like an editor, like a typical working with writing and text. But then I realized because it is a TV station, you ended up working on like documentary series and becoming like a producer for a different platform. So in a way, I gradually found this role where I was introduced to multiple platforms. So in grad school, you're introduced to being a multimedia journalist, but in this position, you're like, yes, you actually have to do this. And that was fun. But yes, so the Migrant Kitchen and all of the other things that we produce are things that we're all very proud of. Like it made me realize it was the best introduction to Los Angeles, first and foremost, because like all of these things were things that were in LA or very close to Los Angeles. And then I think without it, I wouldn't have gotten the excuse to get to know more. Like who would have known, right, that there was just this vibrant Filipino culinary scene way back when? Like right now, I feel like Filipino food is really gaining momentum. But in the beginning, like it wasn't something that people really elevated and celebrated. Or the stories behind like Japanese sake, a lot of those historical things that are very tied to the community here are things that aren't necessarily talked about. So I think I was very privileged in the sense that we had the time and space to be able to talk about them in the documentary. But secondarily, too, we were able to showcase a lot of that history on the website because you could do more and you actually have a lot of reach on the website past the documentary, I think. So one of the things that we did was like there was an interactive like sake introduction. There was like profiles of people who started the restaurant. Like their personal approach to something was very compelling to me. And the idea that they also kind of brought their culture into that endeavor was something that was inspiring to me as well. And I hope for other people, because LA isn't just, on a culture. We're just made up of so many different communities. So I hope that what people get out of it is that their culture is something that is a part of them and that enriches them and makes them different and differentiates them so that they have like different eyes to see as well.
Absolutely. And I really love the stories. And it really fascinates me how someone can find such a mix of cultures in one city like LA, which is really interesting. And there's the fact that there's a strong Filipino community there as well.
Yeah, I that was a really fun world enlarging experience. So, and that was true for the Migrant Kitchen. We did a series called The Broken Bread, which talked about food and food issues. So we talked about food deserts, but in the context of like South LA and how they were approaching it as well. We also had Artbound, which I think is also close to my heart because Artbound talked about a lot of different cultures. We had an episode on Dia de los Muertos and its origins, repopularization here in Los Angeles.
I want to shift a little bit to talk about your family. You and your husband have two kids born in the US. How do you think about making sure that your kids embrace that Filipino culture, starting with the language, for example?
Oh, it's interesting. I think being a parent makes you a little bit more conscious about the future and what you bring to it. So, and having children, I think added a little bit more pressure to make sure that they kind of understand who they are outside of just being born in the US. So, we're lucky in that my husband and I are able to travel back to the Philippines every couple of years. So they know what it's like to be in the Philippines. So they understand, like, their culture. They spend time with their relatives. We do speak Tagalog to them, but not like exclusively. I think we just are naturally the way we are and then hope that something sinks. You just kind of want to make it feel organic rather than forced. For me, I think this is where it was a natural, nice dovetail between being a journalist. My eyes were open in terms of like, oh, there's actually like Filipino events here. So I would take them to like those cultural events, like um, we have a local nonprofit here called Search for Involving Filipino Americans. They've been around for decades and they do such great work and they have such a lot of great family programming for Filipino families. So I've taken them to a couple of programs there so they understand like what local or like folk dance is like, what Filipino martial arts kind of looks like. It's not like a deep dive, but at least they understand. And then they've heard Tagalog spoken at home. And then on the other side, the Chinese side, there's a lot of things we're trying to navigate, right? Not necessarily a decision, but somehow I found a class for them that they can learn the language. It's hard to do like multiple languages, but at least for the Chinese side, there's somebody who can help them navigate the language. I think that's for me, maybe as a journalist, like I've always used language as an entryway into a whole culture because I speak Tagalog, I speak English, and then a smattering of like Mandarin myself and other languages. That's it can tell you a lot about how people think and how they navigate, like how they talk about some things, right? And they're also part of like different cultural festivities. So we try to expose them as much as possible, and then it just becomes again the mosaic of who they perceive themselves to be.
Did you learn English in the Philippines before coming to the US?
Yes. So the Philippines was interestingly, it has been a colony of Spain for like hundreds of years, which is why Tagalog sounds like a lot like Spanish, and we share many cultural commonalities with Latinos. I want to say there's like a big sense of culture and family, also a lot of Catholicism. And then afterwards, we were also a colony of the United States for about 50 years. So we got our educational system from the US. And I want to say English is like a primary language of communication. So even in institutions of higher education, English is really used a lot.
Right. A lot of common things with Latin America. I also grew up in a culture very influenced by the US, and speaking English as a child was extremely important. I want to go back to your career and talk about transitioning from traditional journalism to creating your own business, also around storytelling. And in the past, you have described your work as a mix of poetry with pivot tables. Talk a little bit about what this means for you and how does it reflect in the structure of your work?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm obviously in a very creative line of work, but for any creative endeavor, there needs to be structure and organization as well. But not so much that it stifles creativity. So I've realized throughout my career, it has always been a mix of that. Like, even in simple reporting, there is the spark of an idea, there is a story that is waiting to be told, but then there's also the you need to get in touch with this person. You actually need to set up an interview. You need to write this article, all the way to like producing short videos, right? It's the same thing. You have this creative idea, but then you have to figure out the the steps to make it happen. And sometimes that means scheduling an event, scheduling the venue, making sure your car is available, you have equipment that you're renting, and you have like the team in place to be able to help you make that dream come true. So a lot of the creative endeavor is actually a lot of planning as well. So for me, I realized that you cannot get too far on the creative side without making sure that you're solidly, logistically, realistically able to make it happen. So I think I'm very lucky in the sense that I've actually enjoyed both sides as well. Pretty flexible in the sense that I love the creative ideas and that's what is the fuel that motivates me. But I also enjoy the planning side of things, making sure that every detail lines up so that you can get to that end goal. That means like a lot of Excel sheets, just like making sure all things add up, or Gantt charts to make sure the timeline is realistic, a lot of coordination. But like I said, I enjoy talking to people. So it was it was fun for me.
I imagine that also push you to start your own business, knowing that you're very good at structuring and taking ideas from 0 to 1.
Yeah, absolutely. I realized that along the way that while I enjoy this type of work, not everybody enjoys that work also. There's, some value added once I am part of a team and that I can help them tell their stories better. I also realized along the way that I was so lucky enough to work with a lot of great storytellers, but not everybody has that instinct for storytelling. And sometimes you just need an outside person to be able to tell you, hey, you know what? There is really something special in what you do. And let's figure out what that something special is so that you can communicate it more clearly, so that you're able to make that connection with the people that you want to connect to, like your audience, your readers, your customers. So when you're able, for me, when I'm able to get help people get to that point of clarity in that they're able to tell their stories confidently and to realize like the value that they bring into a conversation, that's success.
That's interesting. What is the type of business that you consult for your work?
So I work with nonprofits, with creative founders, with media organizations. So those are, I think, the three different types of people that I have a lot of personal connection with and commonality with. Most of the time, actually, yes, people do tell a lot of their stories, but I think telling it in a way that's clear and compelling is also a challenge, especially now. So one of the clients that I work with is called Committee of 100. They are a prominent Chinese American leadership organization, and they've been around for quite a while. They were started by Yo-Yo Ma and I Am Pei, a lot of very prominent Chinese Americans. So what I'm helping them do right now is actually making sure that their communication and their storytelling is something that a general audience can read and understand. It's compelling in itself, right? They are a leadership organization that's seeking to empower Chinese Americans, and they're also seeking to bridge U.S. and China relations, which is very much in contention at this moment. So it's very timely. And they have an amazing group of members that are really powerhouses in their own fields. And what we're trying to do is make sure that those stories get told well. Because it's easy sometimes to fall back on like a laundry list of achievements and accomplishments. But if you're not able to kind of condense that and kind of crystallize that into like a why, it's also less compelling. So that's partially one of the things that we're doing together is kind of refining their storytelling and their editorial products just to make sure that people understand the value that they bring into a conversation and what their role is.
And what made you initially make that jump to start your own business, Karen?
Well, I think the jump wasn't too difficult. So if you remember, I actually began my career more as a freelance journalist. And as a freelance journalist, you're kind of doing a lot of things on your own and kind of connecting the dots yourself. So it has a lot in common with starting your own business in itself. It's very entrepreneurial. And if there's anything that is common between like all of the things I've done, it's always been entrepreneurial. Even when I was working as an organization, those organizations still valued people who could take initiative and could kind of connect the dots for people. If there's an issue that came up, there was always value that was added onto people who could kind of find the answers as well and not just kind of wait until an answer presented itself. So I would say it was actually not too bad of a shift. I think the only difference would probably be in the sense that you don't have like an organizational umbrella to lean on. I think telling people that you worked for a PBS station does help open doors. And now you have to kind of do a lot of that introduction yourself. But a lot of the skills are the same in the sense that you do have to make your own opportunities. You have to be more entrepreneurial as well. I think for me, a lot of that shift has happened because I realized that in the long term, it would be beneficial to have more flexibility in life, to be able to take on projects that are really interesting to me as well, and to be able to choose those projects. I've always been a person with a lot of interests. And so starting my own business kind of made sense in the sense that you're able to cast a wide net and really find the spark that interests you and involve yourself in those things.
Absolutely. Do you manage your business by yourself or do you have your own team?
Yes. Yeah, for now, yes. But hopefully in the future, no.
What is the part of being an entrepreneur that you like the most?
I think it's a flexibility, really to the sense of possibility and discovery because at this role you are able to make your own choices and but you're also free to explore like possibilities. Like if there is like an organization or a creative company that is really doing things that you find really intriguing, you have the ability to kind of raise your hands and say, you know what, this is actually really interesting. How can I help or how can I be part of that? And in a way that makes me feel like I'm more connected to society and to the things that are going on around us.
Right. And how long has your business been up and running?
It is very new. So I started just in May.
Wow. And on top of all of this, you have your two children's books coming up. I'm really excited to talk about this. What was the main motivation to write these books?
Oh my gosh. Yes. So I have two books coming out, one in 2026 and one in 2027. One book is called The Shape of Love by Lian Lo. It talks about the Filipino tradition of balikbayan boxes, which I describe to people as giant care boxes because many families in the Philippines have migrant worker relatives. So they're not able to see each other as often as every day, right? Some of them see each other for months at a time, some of them for years. So for us, we've developed this tradition of sending big cardboard boxes filled with all sorts of things from goodies and sweets to like household staples as a way to show that we remember them and that we care. So that's part of my life growing up. I have many memories of like opening a balikbayan box and just like, I don't know if this happens to you, but when you open a balikbayan box, like the smell of the compressed air is still there. So there's like a whiff of something foreign. That's a very sensorial memory. So that's that book that's coming out. And then 2027 is a different book. It's called Maya Breaks It Down. It's with Charles Bridge and it combines breakdancing with the principles of coding. So it's more of a STEM book rather than a kind of a book that talks about culture and innovation. So in a way, it actually talks a little bit about the two things that I'm really interested in, right? Inclusion, which is a lot about culture, and also innovation in terms of like mixing things up and kind of juxtaposing things and to make something. The second project is really fun and interesting because it allowed me to combine two different things. So my children were into breakdancing at that time, and my husband's actually in game design. So he talks a lot about like programming and things. So those are the things that I kind of pulled on when I wrote the story for the second book.
Interesting. What was the moment where you thought about these ideas? I'm just curious what was the main push for you?
I think it was really, and a lot of authors I think can relate to this. As a new parent, you're looking for something that would inspire your children, right? You end up reading a lot of books to them, and it's this really beautiful ritual. But along the way, I realized like there aren't enough books that would showcase who we are and who they are and how they I want them to kind of view the world, right? Now I want to say like there's a lot more books that are more diverse in terms of like story, which is great. But I think there is still always room for more, especially because the world is so big. We can't just depict like one side of it, right? So that's when I started writing. But to be honest, I didn't really, sometimes you just start writing and again, you take the little steps and then you don't realize, like, oh, actually, you've gone again pretty far. So the first book came out of just my personal writing. And then I ended up submitting it to an open call for submissions, which is how it ended up being picked up for publication. So I think there were about 500 or more entries, but they chose mine out of all to publish. And then eventually that gave me enough like motivation or maybe fuel to say like how far could you take it? So that's when you start asking how does this whole industry work? Who are the people that you need to talk to? So it was a whole journey of discovery as well in terms of like the inner workings of the publishing industry, which I'm still learning, to be honest.
Right. And I'm sure it's tricky to pitch your book and get the publishing process just even started.
Yes, but I mean, you just have to try, right? If you don't put yourself out there, there's 100% chance that you fail. But if you at least give it a try, then there's a certain amount of possibility that the thing that you hope will happen will actually happen. So it is very intimidating, I think, for publishing, for journalism, for many things in life. But at some point, you just have to try.
Absolutely. And that's something very important to remember. I also love the main reason why you started this, which is seeing this lack of diversity and how you wanted your kids to get a tangible reflection of that part of your culture that you're trying to teach them.
For sure. I think it's different when they see it published on paper, like a physical object that's like a parent telling them, oh, this is so and so and so. There's like an institutional backing in a way that you're like, this is legitimate because I saw it in a book. I watched it on television. I think one of my kids loved Jelly Bean and Pogo, which is this Filipino television series that's produced by PBS, which is amazing because that didn't exist before. But when we found it, I was like, this is amazing. Now I don't have to tell them. I don't have to be the only one beating the drum, you know?
Yes. And they say kids are like a sponge. And I still remember also my books when I was a child. So I think that's so important. Do you see yourself as a writer in the future, in particular as a book's children's author?
Yes, definitely. I would definitely still keep writing. So my whole career is about storytelling, right? But in a way, the children's books and the stories are very much personal because you can start from the beginning, from myself and my experiences and my past and potentially future, right? As a journalist, you are constantly kind of like surveying the world and what's happening in it. And in a way, you're asking other people to show you their part of the world. And publishing and fiction writing specifically, it's really very internal. So I think for sure it's something that I want to keep doing. And then the journalism will always be, I think, part of it too, as well. Like telling other people's stories, but also being able to tell mine.
In the future, Karen, do you see yourself living in the US as well?
It's an interesting question. I've always thought a lot about borders and countries and all of those things. I think I see us being very mobile in a way, right? Like definitely here for the near term. I don't know whether the future will have us here in the long term. Only because like there's so many reasons to explore other parts of the world. Like my sons are growing up, they might want to see what it's like to also live in a different country. And that is not going to be in the United States because it's much too familiar, right? We still have family in the Philippines too. So, in a way, I always see our family as kind of more of a global family, and we're very much like open to exploration and difference. Like, we have family members who have lived in France, in Japan, in different parts of the world. So it almost feels like there's no necessarily like one home base. Like a place is home because the people you care about are in it.
Do you have family in the US apart from your immediate family?
Yes, we do. Not like direct immediate family, but like grandparents or like cousins of cousins, things like that. So there are people who are connected to me, not necessarily immediate family, but yes.
To wrap up, Karen, well, first of all, thank you for this conversation. You have such an interesting career, and now establishing yourself as a writer, I'm curious on what advice you can give someone who wants to write and has a story in their mind that they want to publish, but it's hard. It's hard to start that process. What would you say to them?
I think this really just to start. This is probably the hardest thing to do too, right? Like there's the aspiration and the dream, but sometimes you have to sit down and to really try and see, like start with a word, start with a really, 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 really terrible first draft, and then you'll find that you'll be able to make it better. But having said that, starting is always the most daunting part. But once you get over it, I think you'll find like, oh, okay, I made this terrible first draft, but I realized I need to make it better. So you'll be able to find the tools that you need to make it better. Or I got this beautiful story. Now what do I do, right? It's another beginning of like, okay, now what is the next step? I think once you take that first move, the questions will come up and then you'll be able to answer them and then you'll be able to progress. So if you want to write, write.
I love that advice. Thank you. What is a good way for people to get in touch with you, Karen?
Absolutely. So people can find me on my website. I'm actually very Googleable because of my name. It's very distinctive. You can find me online at carrenjao.com, and that's CARRENJAO.com. It should have like a contact form. It should have an email. And if people want to have a conversation about what they're thinking of, a project that they're working on, there's also a link just to set up a meeting. So I would love to chat with anybody who's listening, and I'd love to hear your story as well.
Awesome. That's great to know. Curious also, what is the name behind your consulting practice?
I named it Red Thread Consulting. Red Thread is something I've been really fascinated with because of its dual meanings. So in writing, red thread is that common theme that really unites a whole piece together, that you can see it from the beginning and then all the way to the end. But also in many East Asian cultures, that red thread is something that connects you to your audiences, to the people that you're bound to meet. So in a way, it's reflective of both things that I want to be able to do. Like I want to make sure you tell a cohesive story. Also, I want to make sure that you establish those connections, those authentic, meaningful connections with the people you are meant to reach. So I'm looking forward to working with people on that.
Connecting those threads and making sure it makes sense. It's so important. I love your business because of that. And that is also what has pushed you to start this business, is the wave and that thread of storytelling and how everything comes together with your business and your entire career. So just wanted to say that. Thank you so much, Karen. This was amazing. I learned so much from you and I appreciate your time.
Yay. Thank you so much, Mariana. Such a pleasure to be here.
Bye, everyone. That is it for today's episode. This one actually marks the end of season 1 of Arrivals. Creating this show and sharing these stories has been one of the greatest honors of my year. Thank you for listening, for supporting, and showing up for these voices. We are taking a break for the holidays, but we'll return with fresh stories, new guests, and even more depth. Visit arrivalspod.com to make any suggestions, reach out to us for future episodes, future recommendations. I love this community and thank you for being part of it. I'll see you next season.